previous to the coronavirus, I was going to the comic book shop pretty frequently. I have not been to the comic book store in over 2 months, and I'm not even sure if they're coming out with new issues right now. Does anybody have any information on that? Ed?
Honestly, I'm not sure, but judging from the videos I watch on YouTube about like the monthly update or weekly updates of new issues coming out, it seems like we've hit a wall. They're talking about the Dreaming Celestial, and that hasn't been around for a while right now. I assume that comic books are not coming out anymore. There's some kind of pause, and we got to figure out a way around that.
And I just read an article on this, so I was going to ask you guys if you knew about it. So that while they're not doing a pause, like complete pause. What they are doing is they are shifting some of their flagship titles to digital only, and betting that the hardcore subscribers are going to stay current with that, with giving the comic book shops the option to buy them when everything reopens.
Ooh.
If that makes, I know it's weird. I'm pulling it up right now, but of course there's some Batman titles. Of course there's some Superman titles. But yeah, they're going pure digital just for the stretch to not put the burden on the comic book stores as well. For them buying stuff, people can't even come in and buy it. So,
I mean, that's something they've been talking about for a while now, going purely digital and not even like, because the biggest loss on them is printing comics and putting them out and all the issues not being sold that people pre-order and all that stuff. Like, you go digital, it's just boom, done, and then people order. I feel like they've been moving towards that anyway. This could be the beginning of the death of the comic book store. Strouder, what do you think about that?
I think that journalism's dead. I think that the written word is dead. I think if you write anything over 144 characters, it's obsolete. There's going to be smaller companies that, have their print runs. Smaller independent companies, I assume, don't have the option to go to digital, let alone, I'm not going to subscribe to Dark Horse Digital, if that's even a thing that exists. I don't know. I just pulled that out of my ass. But with that said, I think the comic industry, along with a lot of other industries, are going to look utterly different when this thing happens to quote unquote end. And when it does, will you be able to go to your favorite shop in the middle of the week and jaw about your favorite superhero? I hope.
I'd honestly say no, the same way you can't go on Tuesdays to go buy your favorite album at your local music store. It's going to be gone. That's rude.
Amoeba on Sunset's closing and not going to reopen its doors.
They were closing anyway, so now they're just closed. They put the nail in the coffin.
Yeah, and that's just that's an example of something that was teetering on the edge, and everyone knows that the comic book industry, quote unquote, was teetering on the edge with Diamond distribution having issues, and just the natural gravity. I'll almost call it the network channel issue. When you just have 5 comics, when you just have 5 channels to choose from, if you have 100 people, they're going to pick from those 5 channels. But just like cable TV and all of the other expansions of independent comics and smaller offshoots and whatnot, now you have 70 titles, you've got 70 channels, and you've got those 100 people, and they're only going to go to some of them. And some of them are going to watch NBC and ABC and continue on with that line of thinking. And some are going to continue to buy X-Men just because they bought X-Men. But you don't have the old tie of like, this is Captain America 396. I'm going to keep buying this one because this is going to continue, because they do a reboot every year. So if I can just buy, am I buying a number 1? Because that's what it seems to be about. Am I buying a number 1 just to buy a number 1?
You know what, though? And on that note, I want to hit something in the basic premise of digital comic books. To me, and maybe it's just, our age and how we grew up, doesn't give me the same feel as holding a comic book and reading a comic book, swiping a page on a tablet. I've read digital comics. It's just not the same. It doesn't pull me in as much as staring at the page and the ink. And when you had issue 396, it was because you had issues 200 through that, and every single one you bought back issues. There was something to the physical aspect of it that it just isn't recreated, for me at least anyway.
No, I totally agree with you, but I would compare that to, and I'm not trying to be like filthy here or anything, but porn magazine.
Porn.
There was a time where,
Or, sorry,
you
did you
wanted
say
that
porn?
magazine.
Yeah, you both said it like at the same time.
Yeah, no, it's the same
It is.
thing. And like, I mean, when we talk about it now, it doesn't make sense to buy a porn magazine because the new reality, and maybe what Strutter is talking about is the new reality will be there won't be any more damn comic books.
I was going to get to that issue of having that 396 in your collection. And back in the day when porn was so rare, especially when I was underage, when you got that VHS, that was the VHS. You didn't get to scroll. I don't want to know.
Owner either.
I don't know.
Messed around. No.
I don't know what the highest page that I've scrolled into Pornhub is, but it is into the 3 digits, easily into the 3 digits. So with that said, when you just go back to like having a VHS that has 2, maybe 3 movies on it, and they go through the same positions and it's the same people, and the minute, how you can fast forward to the minute.
Wait, 2 or 3 movies? You were spoiled. I had maybe 3 or 4 scenes of one movie on a VHS.
Henry Strutter did not care. Henry Strutter was on a different level. He used to watch porn while ironing his shirt. Well, I think that in the very last thing before I want to hear Lucy's ideas on this is that it's not just us not buying the comics and whatnot. There's a whole generation that have never held comics. There's a whole generation that never had a VHS.
That's what I mean. Maybe it's just our age. We grew up having the comics. It was special.
And so, yeah, going straight to digital, if this is going to be the bulk of your audience now, and that's how they consume things. They don't own things. They're minimalist. They can't afford to buy all of the issues, but getting a subscription for $10 might just work for them to keep at least a little up to date, and they can buy just their one favorite issue.
Or binge 50 back episodes of a comic that they love.
I got you. So if we're going to compare comic books and porn, we might as well throw in the music industry. Lucy, I'm going to draw you in this. What was the last album that you paid for?
The last full album that I paid for, that is a outstanding question.
Thank you.
3, 2,
Lucy, you tell her. Say your truth. Lucy, speak your truth. Speak your truth.
3, 2, 1. I think out of the 4 of us here, I might be the one that's most recently gone to the comic book store regularly, and I haven't been in 2 months. Ed, I know Ed gets in there, but I was going there kind of weekly to see what was coming out there for a minute, and then figured out I had like a $50 to $100 comic book habit a month, and was like, And so I started paring back. And I will miss looking at reading comic books because I agree with you. And sooner or later, it's going to be all digital. And it's going to be tough for the independent guys to get their stuff looked at. Musically, if we're going to talk musically, I think a lot of the stuff that we've been listening to is, at least what I've been doing, is digesting through YouTube or Pandora and just kind of catching on one song at a time. I haven't bought an album for quite some time, to be honest with you.
What was the last one?
Man, maybe Kid Cudi, Man in the Moon 2, and I think that's like 10 years ago. Like I
will say though, which is kind of weird because I see what you're saying, how a lot of people are going to die off without the comic stores and stuff. But I think at the same time, it's kind of ironic that I feel like it's opening up a lot of doors for independent artists by being able to get right directly to their audience, musicians and comic book artists directly. They can find little niches that they just really fit into, and a small but loyal following where maybe they would have had no access to that by having to have it printed and in a comic book store. So while it will wipe out a certain amount of the competition, I think it opens the door for a lot more in a grassroots level sort of way. If that makes sense.
I take my kids to the comic book store, and I have a generation of little ones that have held comic books in their hands. We read them to each other. It's cute.
That's
awesome. I mean, if you're going to compare it, especially in this age of Rona, it's like somebody who's never gone grocery shopping with their parents and they just order online all the time. You know what I mean? It's going to be, that experience is going to be kind of lost. You know, going to the comic book store, it's going to be like going to an antique store almost at some point, where like you're just going looking for old things. There's nothing new anymore for you to get. And I think that's really sad.
I agree, and I think that Bobby's musical analogy is a bit more apt, because I think it's going to be like buying vinyl records. Like, there's going to be a niche market that's always going to be down for it. And Lucy brings up a great point. Like, yeah, Bobby, you're all right. There are going to be more artists that have more chances to put out their exposure, more cable channels, as of my earlier metaphor. But you lose the exposure of just walking by something on the rack and just like, it has a cool cover. And I never would have Googled that. I never would have scrolled and searched that particular thing. But now I found a Martian version of Othello being drawn by a cockroach, or whatever Kafka-esque craziness that you might just find on a comic book shelf that you wouldn't ever Google. You know what I'm saying? Like, you wouldn't fall down a Wikipedia hole and find it. And so I think that there's something sad about not going to the shop and having that experience.
I also want to point out that there are still plenty of comic book stores out there. So anybody watching this, if you haven't been to the comic book store in a long time, go to your local comic book store and just commit to buying a single comic book and help that small business out, and maybe keep these comic books in print for just a little bit longer, because we're going to have to start doing things as we get out of quarantine, because we can't stay locked up forever. You know, it's going to be a little bit while longer. But when we're done, support local businesses and buy American.
Excellent point. Go to your